My neighbor got divorced at 54. Her friends threw her a party, not a sympathy gathering, not a we're sorry wine night, party with a cake that said free at last. And honestly, I understood it completely.
You're listening to Unbound Off Script. No outlines, no safety nets, just Beth Curry talking about whatever the hell she wants, or whatever the hell you've asked her to uncover. It's unfiltered, it's unpredictable, and it's officially started. Pull up a chair.
Welcome back to Unbound Off Script. I'm Beth Curry. I am someone who has spent a not insignificant amount of time thinking about why people do what they do, particularly when it comes to love loss and all the messy territory in between. There's a whole ass version of the story we've been told our whole lives. Woman loses husband, either to a lawyer or a casket, and the story becomes about the search, right? The search for the next one. The replacement, the companionship she surely must need, because what kind of a woman doesn't want that? Turns out, a lot of them. More every year, and they're not broken, they're not bitter. Some of them are, frankly, the most content people in any room. Okay, so today I am talking about a genuine cultural shift, a quiet revolution that doesn't have a march or a hashtag, just a lot of women over 50 making their beds however the fuck they want and sleeping diagonally through the whole damn thing. Okay, talking about the woman who, or the women who land on the other side of a marriage through divorce or widowhood and decide with this full clarity and zero fucks to give and zero apology to stay there, right? Single, unpartnered, and in a lot of cases, actively thriving. I'm also going to talk about what the men are doing. Because spoiler, it's different. It's very, very different. And it tells us a lot about both genders, the institution of marriage, and what people actually get out of it. I did ask some real people to tell me about it. What I got back was one of the most honest collections of responses I've ever received. You know, real people and real answers, not a therapist in the bunch. I'm going to look at what the research says and then, like I said, hear from these actual humans. Sometimes the data tells you what's happening. And then a real person kind of opens their mouth and tells you why, right? So I'm going to talk about it, all of it. I'm going to start with the data because I have a forensics background and I don't feel fully dressed without it. Since 1990, the divorce rate for Americans over 50 has more than doubled. It's gotten its own name, gray divorce, which is either dignified or depressing, depending on how you look at it. I don't know. Back in 1990, fewer than 1 in 10 divorces involved someone 50 or older. And by 2010, it was closer to 1 in 4. That's a movement, I think. And for women, widowhood is an entirely separate chapter. Among women 75 and older who have ever been married, 58% have outlived their husbands. And only 28% of men in the same age group have lost a spouse. Women are statistically likely to end up alone eventually. And the question is, what do they do with that? So according to Pew Research, only 15% of divorced or widowed women say they want to remarry. Compare that to 29% of men who say the same thing. One study that was tracked over 1,000 people who divorced after age 50 for up to a decade. And after widowhood, 94% of women stayed single. After divorce, 77% of women had neither remarried nor cohabited 10 years later. 77%. I'd say that's, women at scale making a choice. I wanted to know what that choice actually looks like from the inside. So like I said, I asked. I'm going to start with Kelly. Kelly was with her husband from age 22 to 56, 34 years. The majority of her life, as she puts it, and she means that literally. But she also told me when it ended, she thought her life was over. Ultimately, she decided her life was worth living. I want you to think about that for a second, because it's, that claim that, she thought her life was over. It's doing a lot of work. She didn't say she healed or found herself or turned a corner. She just said that she decided, that's a choice made from the floor. That's not a small thing. She tells me her oldest daughter no longer speaks to her because of how she behaved during that period. Kelly doesn't excuse it. Kelly and I have talked a lot this year. We've become a bit closer in our friendship as well. And she's owning her shit. And I am so proud of her. Like, I can't even tell you how proud I am of this girl. Her and I had a pretty interesting start a couple of decades ago. But yeah, like she's an amazing person. She really is. And she's such a great friend. But going back to this, Kelly doesn't excuse her behavior. She names it. She was figuring out how to live again, what she liked and what her interests were. Because for 34 years, she had taken care of everyone, right? Everyone but herself. But here's where Kelly's response to me also gets pretty specific. And I want you to pay attention because I think this is the kind of detail that data doesn't capture. And I think that some women can relate to this. And I'm not slamming anyone, okay? Kelly has chronic back pain, and a position that gives her lower back relief is to drape her upper half over a bed while she stays standing, what she describes as an L shape. And she says now she can do that without someone coming up behind her and interpreting it as an invitation, and then telling her she should be glad he still found her attractive. Read the room, my friend. She's in pain. She's not posing for your cheap thrills. She talks about walking around her house naked and it not being a subliminal message, about not eating according to someone else's hunger schedule or whatever diet he was on that week, or not having to spin cover stories for his behavior in public, not having to say, oh, he just doesn't like people. About not having to, wait for a call that he's drunk in another city and in a fight and needs her to drive 2 hours to Vegas at 3 a.m. and then turn around and work all day the next day. That last one isn't hypothetical. That happened more than once. And here's the thing about Kelly that I think is the most important part of her whole response. She says, I still believe in love and relationships. I'm beginning to understand what love truly is and realizing I have had very little true love in my life. I grew up and married into conditional love. I was the dancing monkey. She's not anti-love. She's pro the real thing, and she's learning for the first time at 56 what the real thing might actually feel like. She says she won't rule out a future relationship, but she has zero desire to live with another person right now, and she won't date when she has no intention of it, when she has no intention of it going anywhere. So she thinks that would be cruel to waste someone's time. Like, the self-awareness is amazing. It's not bitterness. It's a woman with a conscience and a fucking spine. Two things that she apparently had to rediscover on her own. What Kelly experienced has a name in psychology, several actually. The relief that she describes, that physical and emotional exhale of no longer managing someone else's chaos, maps directly onto what polyvagal theory describes as a nervous system returning to safety, right? When you've spent years in a state of like this low-grade vigilance, waiting for the call or managing the mood or monitoring the room, your nervous system is running threat detection constantly, and it becomes the baseline. And when that threat is removed, the relief isn't just emotional, it's physiological. Like, your body actually changes. And I know she's going through stuff right now that's really, 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 really good. I'm so happy for her. There's also something that sociologist Arlie Hochschild called the second shift, the invisible domestic and emotional labor that women in heterosexual marriages have historically carried in disproportionate amounts. Season 4, I'm going to be talking about this a little bit, but calendars, doctor's appointments, social coordination, emotional regulation for everyone in the household, right? Kelly carried all of that plus crisis management. When she says she spent 34 years taking care of everyone but herself, it's not a metaphor. It's a structural description of how her marriage functioned. And research consistently shows that women's health is less positively impacted by marriage than men's. An unhappy marriage isn't just emotionally expensive for women, it's physically expensive. And the studies on this are not even subtle. Now I'm going to move on to Michelle. Michelle is 47. She had 2 unstable relationships back to back, and she's been single for 4 years. Her response is one of my favorites, and I want to read most of it directly because she says it in a way that I don't think I could improve. What changed for her? She said, a sense of peace. My son and I didn't have to worry about someone else. The home became a place of safety and comfort, a happy place. What doesn't she miss? The constant pressure to be perfect and take care of a grown man. What has she gained? She says being single for 4 years has given her independence. She found herself again. Doing it on her own was scary at first. Her word, scary. But now she says she's so happy being in charge of her whole life. She calls it empowering to realize she doesn't need a partner to be happy and secure. And then she lists her life. Her son, her dad who has dementia. Man, can I ever relate to this? And she's caring for him. A wonderful brother, 3 dogs. She volunteers. She fosters dogs. She has 2 jobs. It sounds amazing, really. Then she says this, and I love this line. I just don't see how anyone could add to that. I don't have time to have a relationship. And then because Michelle is clearly my people, I also won't settle for anything less than what I feel I deserve. And I have a pretty specific list, so not expecting to find that. LOL. The laugh at the end of a very serious statement is doing a lot of the work. It's not self-deprecating, right? It's not sad either. It's the laugh of a woman who knows exactly what she's worth and has decided the search isn't worth the energy when the life she already has is this full. That is the psychology of voluntary singlehood. It's at its most functional, I think. She's not waiting. She's not settling. She's not performing availability she doesn't feel. She is, I guess, as the researchers put it, flourishing. And it's beautiful. Now, here's where I want to be both fair and honest, because I genuinely like men. Some of my favorite people are men. But I want to talk about what the men are doing. You know, what a significant subset of men do when they find themselves single in their 50s. And I want to do it with the unflinching clarity that a woman with a forensics background and a very little patience for pretense is uniquely positioned to provide, okay? They date younger. Not all of them, not even most of them, but enough that it's become its own kind of cultural shorthand, right? The divorced 55-year-old with a 32-year-old girlfriend. He has a boat now or a motorcycle or both. He's rediscovering himself. Now, before we drag him entirely, I want to look at the psychology because I think it's interesting. After divorce or a major life transition, some men feel drawn to younger partners as a way of rewriting their narrative. Okay? Being desired by a younger woman provides what researchers describe as renewed energy and validation and proof of relevance. It's not cynical, I don't think. Aging is disorienting and divorce is destabilizing. I think a relationship that makes you feel like you still have something to offer is not an irrational response to that at all. There's also the control piece, though. Some researchers are blunt about this. Men who exclusively seek significantly younger women are often looking for less equality, not more connection. A younger partner might have, less established independence and less negotiating power and more inclination to defer. That's not universally true, of course, but it's true enough that I think it's worth naming. One writer describes a male friend of hers as droopy, stooped, and ear-tufted as they come, who insists on dating women 15 to 20 years younger and behaves as though this is entirely normal. I think the point she's making isn't that the man is monstrous. I think it's that he's genuinely never asked himself why, right? Why does youth feel like the requirement? Why does a woman his own age who has lived a life and who has things to say and who knows what she wants feel like a downgrade? Not a slam at all. It's just a question I think is worth asking. I'm going to move on to Duncan. Duncan is 51. He responded to my questions, and his response is the one I keep coming back to because it is, in its own way, the counterpoint to the boat and motorcycle guy, right? He describes the grief of his relationship ending not as relief, but as genuine loss. He talks about grieving the life he thought they were going to have, about the wildly open, endless array of future possibility, feeling not like freedom, but like being lost, alone, and abandoned. What he missed most in losing this relationship was the daily companionship, the memory sharing. He describes having years of small but important memories that now feel like they don't hold the same value because he can't share them with the person he made them with. Like, how totally open and aware is this guy? Like, can you feel it with me? Are you feeling it? Like, it's amazing to me. Um, he says he feels like it was wasted time and like those memories were made disingenuously. And then, and this is a line that kind of stopped me. He says, I know that's likely not true, but that's how it feels. This, guys, this is a man doing his own psychological work in real time in a text message. That's the ability to hold the emotional reality and the intellectual reality at the same time without collapsing into either one. That's not easy to do at all. And most people never learn how. Um, he says he's afraid to give himself to someone so completely again. He says it's broken something in him, specifically his trust in his own intuition. He always thought of himself as intuitive, and this relationship called that into question. And what he's looking for now, above everything else, is just genuine kindness. That's his number one. Not chemistry, not compatibility, kindness. But here's what Duncan wants. He's clear about it. He says, I long for close friendship and the sharing of experiences and adventures, the sharing of monotony and daily ritual. It's all a little better with a best friend and partner. He tells me that relationships add purpose to his life. He wants to give helpfulness and comfort and support to someone, and he misses vulnerability, and he misses the laughter and the mischief. And he says, mostly, I suppose, it's having someone to share life with. And I want to hold Duncan's response right up next to Kelly's and Michelle's. Not to say one is right and one is wrong, but to illustrate something the research already told us. Men and women have historically gotten very different things out of relationships. Kelly and Michelle's relationships were costing them something, but Duncan's was providing something. Those are not the same experience, and they produce very different instincts about whether to do it again, right? I also heard from a man who asked to remain anonymous. He's 54, never married. His last relationship was, by his description, toxic, dysfunctional, and he came to realize not even serious from her perspective. When it ended, he says he felt what he can only describe as an elephant lifting off his chest, like he could finally, fully inhale. He also wasn't looking for another relationship. And then something happened that he didn't plan for. A woman in his life, someone he'd known for years, waited until she knew his last relationship was truly over, and then told him she'd had feelings for him for a long time. She tried to tell him before. Out of respect, she waited. He says this is now the best year he's had in decades. She's close to him in age. The relationship is long distance, but full of joy. And then he says something worth noting, directly given everything I just talked about. He says, a lot of guys my age are with women in their 30s. I couldn't do that. He's 54. He found his person. She's close to his age. He seems entirely unbothered by this, which tells you everything about where his head is. What does he think relationships provide? He says, a safety net that isn't just financial or logistical, but emotional. It's the knowledge that if I fall, I'm not falling into a void, but into a pair of hands. Into a pair of hands. I've been thinking about that image since I read it. Nicole's story doesn't fit neatly into either the staying single and thriving category or the found love again category, and I think that's exactly why it belongs here. Nicole tells me that her and her husband started drifting apart when she got sober in 2019. They stopped being intimate. They started sleeping in separate rooms. COVID arrived. She put on weight. And in 2023, they celebrated 10 years of marriage. They went on vacation and they came back and kept trying. But in January 2025, a client of hers died. And then that following April, she turned 50. She says, I decided I wanted to live my life happy, not missing out anymore. They're separated now, not divorced, and both are in new relationships. She says intimacy is extremely important to her. So is love. So is respect. I'm not here to editorialize Nicole's choices. What I notice is the timing. A client's death and a 50th birthday. These two data points that arrived within months of each other and kind of recalibrated everything. Now, psychologists call this a mortality salience trigger. So it's a moment when the awareness of your own finite time becomes undeniable. It doesn't always produce grief. Sometimes it produces clarity. Sometimes a person looks at their life and realizes the thing that they've been tolerating isn't just uncomfortable. It's expensive in years and in aliveness. And Nicole decided to stop paying that price. What I notice across all of these responses, the women who are choosing to stay single are not choosing it from a place of defeat. Kelly is rediscovering what love is supposed to feel like. Michelle has built a life so full she genuinely can't figure out where a relationship would even fit. They're not waiting to be rescued. They have stopped believing rescue was ever the point. And the men in this group, Duncan, the anonymous 54-year-old, they're thoughtful and self-aware and notably interested in women their own age, and that matters. That's not the cultural default for men in the 50s, and the fact that these particular men operate that way is probably not a coincidence. Self-awareness tends to cluster. The research backs all of it up, too. Women who stay single after 50 report increasing satisfaction with singlehood over time. Their loneliness, when it exists, is far more connected to the quality of their connections than to the presence or absence of a partner. Right? They're more likely to invest in friendships and pursue their own interests and, according to multiple studies, be more physically active and socially engaged than their partnered counterparts. And the psychological framing I keep returning to is identity certainty. Studies show that women in their 40s and 50s report greater clarity about who they are than they had in their 30s. They have a stronger sense of purpose, a deeper inner strength. You don't arrive at that kind of clarity and then hand it over to someone who needs his schedule managed and his ego maintained. Some women do find love again after 50, and it's real and it's right. Nicole's story is still being written. The anonymous man fell into a pair of hands he didn't know were waiting. Duncan is still looking with his eyes open and kindness at the top of the list. But for the Kellys and the Michelles of this world, the women who looked at what was being offered and looked at what they had built on their own and did the math, I think we might want to stop calling singlehood a consolation prize. Because from where they're standing, it looks a lot like the prize itself, if you ask me. I want to thank every person who responded to my questions. Your honesty was generous, very, and your specificity was brave, in my opinion. Kelly, Michelle, Duncan, Nicole, you put real words to something a lot of people are living silently. And to the anonymous man who described falling into a pair of hands, I hope you know how much that image landed. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it. If you have a story of your own, whether you're happily single, happily partnered, or somewhere in the middle figuring it out, the conversation is open over in the Facebook group. If you want to support the show, production costs and stuff, you can pop over to Coffee. All the information is in the show notes. I will see you next time.
You've been listening to Unbound Off Script. The script is gone, the chair is empty, and Beth Curry is officially out of here. If you've got something you want her to dive into next time, let us know. Until then, stay curious, stay raw, and keep it unbound. We're out.